Hey guys, welcome back to Tabletop Glory. On screen you can see my rendition of a green dragon. Now this is the Pathfinder edition green dragon by Wizkids. I actually really like this sculpt. There's a lot of people that for whatever reason don't seem to like it. I really enjoy it. I think it's a good looking sculpt. Now, however, you will notice that I have not gone ballistic levels of all out on this paint scheme. There are some things that you could do, especially if you were wanting to paint for, let's say, a competition, and we'll talk about those in the appropriate places where I could have done that. However, for a model that I'm only going to put on the table maybe once every 6 months or once a year at most, I don't see the point in going all out and spending hours upon hours painting something that no one's ever really going to get to see. Now, admittedly, it's going to sit in my display case and I'll get to be the one to look at it all the time, but I don't really see the point in spending tons of hours on something that no one's ever really going to get to see, and I'm still proud of the paint job that I did. So let's take a look and see how I did that. Now to start out, I want to apologize because the dragon is a big model. It's a bit awkward for me to record. I don't really have a way of moving the camera farther away from the desk than I did without almost putting it over my shoulder. Now I just went out in the garage and picked a green spray paint can that I happen to have. It was like an olive drab, or that's what it was claiming. Very clearly it's not. It's pretty close to Lauren Forest if you're following along at home. That's the color that I would recommend starting with. Now, my Incubi Darkness wash here is actually made from Colia Green Shade mixed with Contrast Medium and Flow Aid. And that's how we're kind of able to go ahead and shadow and shade all of our recesses. I originally started out by just doing the joints and things, kind of trying to add a pop of color to them. However, I decided that this was a really good wash to kind of put all over everything because it really made the scales pop. Quickly moving into a dry brush, again of that Lauren Forest color. This was how I realized how close a match I had come. I just wanted to go ahead and add a bit of color back into all of the scales, and then I end up hitting it with a little bit of moot green as just an all-over bright dry brush on areas that the sun would be exposed to, but I was very light with that dry brush. Now when it came to the moot green, the only place that I was really kind of heavy with my dry brush was the face. I wanted to make sure that it actually got a good definition between that dark Colia green shade and the bright moot green. So out of everything that happened on today's model, this is one of my deepest regrets. I should not have kept the wings green. I am happy with the paint job, however, one of the things that I will probably change after a little while of looking at it is probably going to change the wing color entirely. I should have changed it to maybe either more of a tan or a leather color, as that would be a place where the skin is stretched very taut. And even if I had left it green, I should have gone to a much brighter green. But I probably should have dry brushed it toward a leather tan color to simulate that thin stretched out membrane that is the wings. That is one of my deepest regrets here, that I didn't try to make it look more translucent. I've always been a big fan of non-translucent looking wings because they would need to be quite strong to hold up a dragon. However, I feel like with the green dragon, this is one of the times I should have made the exception because of the color palette, number one, and number two, it is literally one of the only things about this model that I don't like. And it is one of the biggest places where I could have added more color to the model, and I didn't take that opportunity. So learn from my mistakes. Now I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to have this faded transition between a dark brown, an orangey brown, and then all the way into some kind of ivory color. So the three colors that ended up being the primary ones that I used to create this color ended up being XV88, Jericho Orange. I ended up using a little bit of Averland Sunset. That got me the majority of my blends. I ended up using a blend of Averland Sunset and Wraithbone to create my ivory color, and I used a Doombull brown glaze that I created on my wet palette to be my deepest brown, and we'll cover that as we put them on. So right now I'm mixing 50/50 XV88 and Jericho Orange, and those are the colors that are going on now. I'm putting them all over. My plan had been to do wet blending, which is what you'll see me doing in the beginning. However, my paints ended up drying quick enough that I ended up just doing glazing, and it worked out just fine for me. Now, as I was adding more and more yellow in, this is when I started to transition into using Wraithbone and started to end up with more of an ivory color. Now, I ended up building up about 6 or 7 layers worth before I ended up switching to a full ivory color closer to the top. So that's how you kind of get more of that blend between the brown to the yellow spectrum before I just completely switch gears and go in for straight, almost near white. Now, I end up blending that in a bit more here in a bit, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but I wanted to let you know where this transition and this fade comes from between the brown to the yellow. So you're going to notice one thing real quick is I'm making a lot of V-type shapes here with my smaller brush. Now, I've completely switched gears here. We're adding more ivory, and I'm going back and forth between these different V shapes. I'm blending in with those V shapes both my ivory color as well as that original orange brown. It's very important that we create this lateral movement back and forth across these two colors as opposed to just a smooth blend. That is how we get more of a natural bone appearance as opposed to something that is fabric that's going to have that smooth transition. It's one of these things that just kind of works when painting bone, and you can take this to pretty much almost any color when you're trying to do horns on animals, whether it be for fantasy or science fiction or anything like that. So it was at this point where I realized I needed to start adding a bit more definition into the horn and really starting to darken things up. Now, I do add just a tiny bit of black to take it to an extreme right up next to the scales of the dragon's head. But I'm taking some Doombull brown and I'm just kind of glazing it in around the bottom. And then I also end up using a little bit of stippling to kind of almost do a similar blend like what we did with the ivory and the brown orange, and just kind of blend that in vertically. You can see me here, I'm just adding in some of those vertical stripes, and then I just kind of stipple things in with a bit of a glaze. Now, to recap, the colors starting at the bottom of the horn, we have Doombull brown, and then we have XV88 mixed with Jericho orange, and then we have that mixture mixed with Averland Sunset, and then Averland Sunset mixed in with Wraithbone to create our ivory color, and that's how we got that transition in the horn. Now, I'm starting out with using my orange-brown mixture on the teeth, and I'm just kind of going in and coating all of those. Now, to save some time, you don't have to do the insides of the mouth if you really don't want to. It depends on how quickly you need to get this thing on the table. However, I will end up painting all the way around the teeth just because I am retentive like that, and I know that if I don't do it, it will bother me. But then we're also, similar to how we painted the horn, going to take some of that ivory color and we're going to leave just a tiny sliver of our orange-brown mixture in the teeth right up next to the gum line, and that's going to give us a more natural appearance to those teeth. So I ended up mixing up more of that orange-brown using the Jericho orange and the XV88, and then I applied that across the majority of the spikes on the dragon. Now, I end up putting this on all the spikes eventually, but I knew with the way that I had to handle the dragon, I didn't want to do them all at once, as I would just end up wiping the paint off. I then go back in with some of our ivory color, and I use that ivory color to kind of blend in the tips a little bit, using some dry brushing with one of my old detail brushes. This is a really great way to keep using some old detail brushes without just having to get rid of them, is it allows you to dry brush on small details like this. I chose to use dry brushing because I wanted to save some time here. Now, you could go in and edge highlight all of this, but it would take a very long amount of time, and an amount of time that I was not willing to spend just to do something subtle like this. Now, it was at this moment I kind of realized I had forgotten to finish the mouth, so I took some Emperor's Children pink and some Screamer pink that I had left over from another project, put some Screamer pink down first, and then hit it with a little bit of an edge highlight of the Emperor's Children. For the roof of the mouth, I knew I just wanted to darken things up, and around the gum line, darken things up a little bit, so I ended up using a Athonian camo shade to do that. I knew I needed to add more color to the model, and fuchsia orange would be a really great way to do that. So on the forearms and the hind legs, there's these really large scales that I had painted the same color as all of the spikes, and I just went ahead and put in some fuchsia orange and then re-edge highlighted everything with a dry brush. Now the belly would have also been a good place, however I thought that would have been a bit over the top, and had I actually gone through with my plan for the wings and painted it more of a leather color, the wings would have been an excellent place to have put this. So it was at this point where I realized that I needed to brighten the wings up a considerable amount. However, I just didn't take it far enough. Like I talked about a few times already, I should have done it more of a leather color instead of trying to keep it green like it is. That's my bad, and it's something that I'm just going to either have to learn to live with or I'm going to have to change. Now, that's not to say that I don't like it. I think it looks good, but I think there's just too much green on the model despite it being a green dragon. I also noticed that because I had been choosing to handle this model by the wings, that I had actually been rubbing some of the paint off, and I wanted to add some highlights to this anyway, so I went a little heavy with the moot green, created a bit of a glaze knowing that it would dry translucent and turn much darker than what you can see it now, and went ahead and applied that across anywhere where the bones in the wings would be. And I actually, despite how bright it is here in the footage, wish I had actually put on a couple more layers and made it a little bit brighter than what it was in the final product. Now as I start wrapping this up, I did want to add a pop of color using black. I wanted to put some highlights with gray because I know that that pops quite a bit, and I thought the claws would be a great place to do this. I actually almost ended up making the teeth black as well, but I thought that might have been a bit overboard. So I'm just painting up all the nails using black, both sides, and then my edge highlight is directly across the top of the nail with a little bit of Dawnstone Gray. Now I just wanted to take a second to thank you guys so much for all the love and support. I have never had a channel do this successful. I've tried to do YouTube a few times before with video games, and the fact that I have switched my passions so 180 to go all the way back to tabletop games, and then to have so many of you who share that passion as well subscribe to this channel and really show your support means the world to me. In my last video I talked about how we cracked 500. Well, we just cracked 600 as of while I was editing this video. I am flabbergasted. I have not seen growth like that on any platform outside of my TikTok account, and I'm very grateful for the love and support and all that you guys do for me. Thank you very much. For those of you who are just watching for the first time maybe with this video, and you've never watched one of my videos before, I am a colorblind miniature artist, and that is something that normally doesn't go well together. And I am very grateful that you guys really love and enjoy what I'm doing. So thank you so much for being here. So it's time to start wrapping things up, and I realized that there was quite a lot of texture on the belly that wasn't really good for dry brushing. So I thought I would just start adding in some lines kind of following those same patterns, some going all the way to the edge of the model and some focusing right in the crest of the chest. And the amount of texture that added alone really made a world of difference on the final model. One of the final details that I decided I needed to add was I went ahead and colored in the nostril in the nose and then kind of dry brushed that out along the outside edge of the nostril. And I felt this added a lot of depth to the model. Now unfortunately I did forget to record myself painting the eyes, and I do apologize, but I painted the eye using Mephiston red and then a little bit of Jericho orange right in the middle just to give the idea of a pupil. And there we have it guys, the final product. If you didn't see last week's video where I built the base, go ahead and check that out, as there's a lot of good information in there about how I think through a project, and especially how I plan out my bases for large models like this. I think a lot of you guys will find it pretty interesting. In any case, thank you guys so much for all the love and support, and if you liked this video, please hit the like button. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button. It lets me know what kinds of content to make more of in the future. And as always, if you have any idea for future episodes, feel free to leave those in the comments. And until next time, may your display case always be filled and your pile of shame never runs empty. I'll see you in the next one.